What's going on, everybody? JT here, and I have a fantastic guest for today's episode. Today, joining us, we have Wragge, who is currently the Global Head of Business Development at the Algorand Foundation. Before joining Algorand, Eric spent over 20 years at JP Morgan, where he most recently served as Managing Director in Structured Finance and Head of Asset-Backed Securities in Northern Europe. Super excited to have this conversation. Eric has only been with the Algorand Foundation for a handful of months now, so now that he's got his legs underneath him and he's ready to hit the road running, I'm really excited to have this conversation. So welcome to the program, Eric. How you doing?
Thanks very much, JT. And I know we've been trying to do this for a while, so thank you for having me on.
Let's get this going with a little bit of background on yourself, because as I'd mentioned, you spent about 20 years with JP Morgan in the banking industry. So I'm really curious to get an understanding of your journey and how you went from, the banking industry into the blockchain industry, and then how you found your way to Algorand.
So I grew up in Canada, went to university there, did a bunch of different things even before I got into banking. So I did development work for a while. I worked for government for a little bit. I got into banking, I would say, because certainly at the time, so I really entered, this is around 2000 when I got into it. I was super interested in all the developments that were happening there. So if you think back to those days, it's when credit default swaps were first coming out. There was the interest rate derivative market was developing. Securitization was becoming a thing. And I thought it was a great environment. It was fast paced. It was innovating. It's somewhere where you could do big things. Right. So that was of great interest to me. Now I think I had a very fortunate seat, a very fortunate career path in terms of I would say always being on pretty much the cutting edge of developments in those areas. And I think over time, or sort of, I would say the last 3 or 4 years there, a lot of what I was doing was working with technology companies in one way or another. So you think about the fintech companies kind of trying to get between people and banks, disintermediating them, mixing up the way that things are done. I found that fascinating. So I was certainly, I would say, 2019 ready to leave banking. Then COVID came along. So it was a case of, it was a case of maybe not leaving at the wrong time. And there was making sure the team was in a good place, making sure the business was running smoothly. And really there was 2 areas, I won't say it was only blockchain that interested me, but the 2 areas I guess that did fascinate me were climate transition, right? Because I think that's a massive issue facing the world. There's going to be huge amounts of capital deployed, big changes. So that was one area. The other area, I guess, within technology was blockchain. And what really interested me about that was just it's something that can upend or radically change the way that things are done. Right? It's not an incremental improvement. It's a very big change. So I guess that's really what interested me in that area. Ultimately, the journey to Algorand was one of, I guess, to maybe give away some of my views or opinions or whatever. I'm not in the camp that thinks that. I look at blockchain as being a technology, right? And if it's a technology, I think the most important things are, and I've had this debate many times since coming in with different people and so on, but I think fundamentally, whether something works or not, in any business, and I've worked with so many businesses over the years, there's no business I've ever encountered where people prefer things that are slower, more expensive, more vulnerable, less secure. Like, it just doesn't happen, right? So I think the first thing for me was identifying what things or what projects would be, and stop me if I'm rambling here, but what are the things that actually work properly that seem to have a really excellent group of people around them? And obviously, Silvio being Exhibit A, but I think that's really what drove me to Algorand.
Right. No, that makes sense. And I know the journey itself into blockchain can be just that. It can be, quite the journey, because there's so many, at least now, maybe 5-6 years ago, it wasn't the case, but at least now there are so many different types of technologies, different layer ones, even layer zeros, layer twos. So there's a lot to choose from. So I think it is telling that after the 20 years of your background that you did decide to land with Algorand. But I want to ask, as the global head of business development and capital markets, it's quite the long title that you have there. What exactly does that role entail?
So what it means, and I would say, one thing about the foundation, and I'm sure you appreciate this as well, is that it's going through. There's really been a big change in tone or change at the top, right? With Stacy coming in earlier this year, but after that, we've got myself coming in. We have John Woods, the new CTO. We've got the new chief operating officer coming in from Revolut. We've got somebody coming in on the marketing side of things. We've got, there's sort of a lot of change there, and I think part of forming a management team and whatever you're doing is everybody getting together. I mean, really, I think it was Singapore where most of us were all in the same room at the same time, and going through for 12 hours straight strategy and what we want to do, what we want to focus on, and so on. And I think all of that's coalescing. If we look at the business development capital markets area, really the way that I'm thinking about that now is it's really about enabling. I think for developers, the strategy is pretty clear, and I think John's been on your show to outline that, right? We want to make it a very streamlined, easy, smooth experience for developers to come onto Algorand and build whatever it is that they're developing, right? And we want to have the relations there so that if they run into problems, they don't have to hunt around on the internet for hours and hours to figure out how to get around that. I think that's sort of point one. The business development area, I think there's really two things. For myself, there's obviously, communities, which is the hackathons and so on. I think what we need to do as a blockchain is we need to really be more systematic about engaging with the bigger opportunities, right? Obviously, there's FIFA. Obviously, there's things that have happened in the past. But, in the same way that developers look for blockchains, companies and organizations look for blockchains as well, right? And we kind of need to make it a more easier, streamlined process for them. And I think, if I look around, I think we need to target those kinds of opportunities. That's kind of a bit of a slow burn. I think the second thing that we need to do is, we have Milkomeda now, we have different bridges, we have things are coming up. The whole, I think, compatibility with other blockchains is a massive priority now, particularly that we're in an environment where different things are going to start running into problems and have already had problems, right? So I think a lot of what we need to do, and this is, the community should help us with this, is going out to other projects and explaining to them the benefits of Algorand and exactly how it is that they can take whatever it is that they're doing and realize the benefits of the Algorand blockchain, right? So if you want it cleaner, cheaper, greener, faster, then this is how you move whatever you're doing onto Algorand.
Now, are there any processes in place that Algorand is either creating or has already created to help projects migrate from, any specific chain over to Algorand? Because I know back when the Terra Luna fiasco happened, there was actually a little bit of effort to help projects migrate to Algorand from Luna, and I thought that was a really great idea, and that maybe they could build that out to a migration toolkit to help projects migrate from wherever they are in the blockchain ecosystem. Do you know if Algorand's working on anything like that?
So I think the main one is Milkomeda, right? Where you can just take your Solidity code, drop it in, and you're off to the races. Which to my mind is huge. That's fantastic, right? People have been complaining for years that, oh, well, it's really hard. Like, I don't want to have to learn a new code, blah, blah, blah. So I think just generically, like, obviously, I guess certain blockchains now are in the news and having all kinds of different problems and so on. I think, to my mind, the main thing about strategy and doing things is that most of these things take time, right? So it's not a great strategy in my mind to be like, oh, look, yesterday there was problems with Tether and USDC on Solana, so let's everybody start running around today contacting Solana projects. To me, that's not really it's very reactive, right? And if you're always chasing yesterday's thing, then you're never really going after, going after it in the future. I mean, I look at this as kind of, I don't know, business strategy or whatever you call it, but I look at all these chains in the world, and their only purpose in life is to kind of let people do Ethereum stuff, but avoid the gas fees, and that's it, right? Like that's the game plan, and they've been very successful at that. And if you add up, you add up the market cap of each one of those chains and you put them all together, well, they're bigger than Algorand's.
Right.
So, but their job is just to be fast and cheap, and we're already fast and cheap. So, I guess it's things like that where we need to make it easier for people to beat a path to our door.
Yeah, and I think Milkomeda does a great job at doing that. And for those watching that are unaware of Milkomeda, I did an interview with the CTO of DC Spark. It was a fantastic interview, and they have built out a fantastic EVM rollup for Algorand. So anybody watching out there that has an EVM project and wants to try the benefits of Algorand, come on over using the Milkomeda A1 rollup. But moving on from that, outside,
is it Milkomeda or Milkomeda?
You know what? When I had them on the show, I've heard it a couple different ways from the CTO himself and from the people that I set up the show with. So it seems like there's actually like a couple different pronunciations even within the team. So you know what? I really don't know the exact way to pronounce it, but it's fantastic, and I have used it. So I'll just leave it at that.
Cool. Yeah, you could do a poll afterwards.
Right. How do you want to pronounce this? And we'll all just land with that. So what aspects of the Algorand ecosystem, either current or future, excite you the most?
I mean, there's a lot. Like, I feel like a kid in a candy shop.
That's a loaded question.
Yeah, no, but it's genuinely, right? Because the first thing I did when I came in, I think probably for the first month, was just keep my mouth shut and listen to people. I'd already, for several months, even before the Algorand stuff, I mean, I'd gone down the rabbit hole myself to the point where I'm trying to replicate. I've got the N and the P, and I've got trying to multiply them together and do the prime numbers and factorize them and do all this kind of stuff. But I mean, I think it's important to just listen to people. And even when I came, there's people, I found the community actually to be, on the whole, like massively thoughtful, where I would get long threads that people put together and found me on Twitter and posted them. And I said, okay, fine. Somebody takes the time to write something like that that's thoughtful and well put together, then I have time to spend half an hour or 20 minutes on a call with them. So I spend tons of time doing that. I mean, I think that the DeFi space still small but growing, and I think it's pretty much at the point where you kind of have all the tools you need, even though liquidity should be higher, right? And hopefully will be higher with some of the measures that we're taking. I think the NFT, the creator space, is growing despite pretty much everywhere else falling off a cliff. I think the stuff that Matt and Hightower are doing in the impact space is pretty. A lot of it's quite unique. I think that, to me, is massively exciting. Right, there's the disaster relief projects in the U.S., the payments in Afghanistan, this kind of stuff. I mean, I think this is really where blockchain can change the world, and I think these are fantastic. But literally, it's like every 2 or 3 days, I find myself talking to somebody who's got some amazing idea, and I'm like, wow, that's super cool.
Yeah, I sort of feel the same way. And as somebody that tries to cover the ecosystem to some degree, it's become ever more difficult to do that as the ecosystem grows. I mean, back when I started making videos maybe 15 months ago, it was very easy. You talked about the 1 or 2 applications that we had on mainnet, and the theoretical ideas of what's to come. But now the ecosystem is growing at such a rapid pace that I totally agree that it's really difficult to keep up, and everyone has pretty fantastic ideas out there. One of the things I really liked about the Algorand ecosystem, still like about the Algorand ecosystem, is that unlike a lot of other ecosystems, it's not, of course it exists to some degree, but it's not plagued by the same, kind of get rich quick schemes that you see plaguing a lot of the other ecosystems, whether it be, scam tokens or, a whole bunch of meme coins. Of course, we have some of those on Algorand, and I don't want to disparage anything of the sort, but I do just think Algorand as a whole, whether it's I don't know if it's from the top-down culture approach of the leadership that kind of bled into the community, but it does kind of seem that the community is pretty high level. I don't know if I don't know if that makes sense in a way, but it seems like the community is much different than what I'm used to in other ecosystems, because I've been in the community, well, the crypto space since 2017, and up
Yeah.
until I found Algorand, there was it did really seem like once I stumbled into the Algorand ecosystem that it really was the adult in the room, which they have kind of used as a slogan now.
Well, I think it's a slogan. If that's the slogan, it's great
It
because
is.
nobody needs adults in the room like they do now. So that's great. I mean, I guess one thing I would say is that I think we always need to be a little bit careful, and I agree with everything you say. I mean, the community that I've encountered so far is absolutely fantastic. We can never count our chickens in the sense that, let's say that Algorand was 15 times bigger than it is today. Yeah. It's a much bigger honeypot in that case for somebody to come in and start doing dirty tricks. And being an openless, permissionless blockchain, it's not like you're going to be sort of vetting people at the door and kicking them out when they misbehave. So I think that's maybe one thing that I would say, like, long may it last. And I think a lot of these things rely on a bit of social policing as well, where it's not going to be Inc. or the foundation or anybody like that, being gatekeepers. I think some of it relies on that, and also we just need to be vigilant, right? Like the fact that the chain's never gone down is remarkable. That's amazing.
There aren't too
But
many chains that can say that.
there certainly aren't, right? There certainly aren't. But what we should also never do is let ourselves stray into hubris, where we say that that's impossible, right? Where we say it's sort of like it can't happen to us kind of thing. I mean, every time in my career, I've sort of seen people strutting around saying it can never happen to me. It usually happens to them within the next 6 months. So, um,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah, and the point's well taken. I mean, currently, Algorand, as I said, it's growing rapidly, but it is still smaller in comparison to other ecosystems. And as the ecosystem grows, so does the target on its back. So that's certainly a fair point and something that we should all watch out for. But there's just something that I feel like stems from the culture at the top that kind of has bled down in the current iteration of the ecosystem. But I completely agree that as things grows, the growth of the bad actors will also continue as well. So, you mentioned some of the measures that Algorand is taking to increase liquidity, and some of those measures have been introduced to be debated on currently with the current iteration of Algorand Governance. So, I want to ask, what is your opinion on the current iteration of Algorand Governance, and in what ways do you wish to see it evolve?
so I've actually spent a lot more time on governance than I was expecting since I joined, simply because it's really important, right? I mean, one only needs to look through the Reddits and the Discords and the tweets to realize it's something that not only are people passionate about it, but they spend a lot of time on it, and it matters, right? So it's not uncommon to see these big things that are very well thought out and so on. And so I think it's something that ultimately, if we envision let's envision Algorand in 25 years from now. Okay, so it's around in 25 years. What's it going to look like? It will hopefully still have never gone down in the 25 years.
Knock on wood.
But it will have to be something that's sustaining itself through the transaction fees, and there'll probably be something that looks like the foundation that's there to coordinate different things that happen and upgrades and this type of stuff. But in my mind, and I think everybody else's mind, it would be something that would be much more, there would be structures and processes and methods evolved for it to kind of take care of itself, right? And so I just think the road between here and there, we're already partway along that road, but there's a lot more that we could do. So I think the general theme of decentralization, we're just going to be progressing further and further along that, which I think is great. I'm not a big believer in doing things that are, I guess, drastic and irreversible. So wherever possible, I personally, as a Algorand holder, like I would like to see things where, the idea of putting a pot of tokens towards the creator community, right? I think it was described as NFT or something. It could be more broad than that, whatever. But I think, trying something out on that front to me makes a lot of sense, right? Putting something where, there's also an allocation of resources into the xGovs. Well, and that xGov thing, it's going to take evolution, right? It's going to take time to work out. So let's just try it. Let's see what happens. And I think there's probably, from the wider ecosystem, there's loads of examples of things that have worked out well and things that have worked out badly.
Right.
So to my mind, those make sense. And I think, the point about the rewards generally for governance, for me, it's a step in the right direction. Me as a person from the foundation, I'd say it's probably what's been put out there. It's subject to community views. There's all kinds of feedback that we see on it already. That can evolve. It's for 2 quarters, is what we're talking about. Me as an algo holder, I would say I would have put it lower. Yeah, as an algo holder, because I don't think, I guess, if I think about it using a corporate finance hat, which plenty of people have told me that's the wrong hat to put on, but if I was, right, you'd look at it and you'd say, okay, well, you have something that has some assets inside of it. If you take those assets out and you distribute them to the holders, who anyways were the beneficiaries of that thing, that company or whatever it is, by doing that, nobody gets richer or poorer than they were before. You see what I'm saying? You've just moved those assets around. And so the question then is really one of, like, if you take tokens that would otherwise be distributed as governance, sort of governance rewards, just the general kind for kind of, turning up and voting, are those tokens, like, is it better that they get sort of just redistributed to people who already hold algos, or is it better that they have the possibility of being used for something that could add value to the ecosystem? Right. That's kind of the way I look at it. But this will evolve, right? There's lots of opinions, and I think that's exactly what governance is about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure the Algorand Foundation found out really quick that politics is messy. I mean, it's certainly not the easiest game. And I don't want to make this political at all, but I actually have a little bit of experience working on a couple political campaigns. I won't mention whose, but it's a messy game. I mean, it's not easy getting everyone to agree on something. I mean, we'll just leave it at that. That's for sure.
It's human behavior. I mean, you put more than 3 people in a room, you're going to get politics. So
absolutely.
There's nothing negative about it at all in my mind.
No, it's kind of fun, but it's a tough game. It is a tough game to play. But I want to ask, because you mentioned the xGovs, and there's a lot of speculation on how that's going to look in the ecosystem. Is there any timeline on when those xGov DAOs will be initiated?
I think it's being worked on now. I can't talk about governance as well without mentioning Audrey, who's recently been appointed, right, to be the spokesperson running governance, who's fantastic. I mean, she's deep into the space. She's probably you should probably talk to her at one point as well if you haven't already. But I think it's great to have her there because she's pulling everything together. And there's obviously with Massimo and Shai and so on, but I think what we're trying to do, and I'm not at the forefront of this, lots of other people are, but from my point of view, we just need to get an MVP out there and have people start using it, because I'm sure when they do, there's going to be 1,000 improvements that can be made, but the work on that is going on. So
cool.
That's coming soon.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. So let's move on a little bit from governance and transition to FIFA. I know we mentioned FIFA a little bit, but Algorand has a partnership with FIFA, including the FIFA Plus Connect app, where players can own iconic FIFA moments. But with FIFA right around the corner, in what other ways will we be seeing Algorand be highlighted or used, or anything of the fashion?
On the FIFA thing specifically, I mean,
is there anything else that we can expect outside of this FIFA Plus Connect this go round? Because I know it's a multi-year partnership, so I'm sure plenty is going to come out of it over the years. But I'm just curious on if there's any sort of alpha that can be leaked before the World Cup starts with Algorand.
Yeah, I mean, I wish I had something to drop here. I don't. I mean, the FIFA, it's mainly something, and I know the foundation ends up being credited with it often and so on, but it's really something that was driven by and being run with Inc.
Yep.
Algorand Inc. So they're the best people to speak to it, and certainly, like with any super big things like that, there's going to be all kinds of, and I haven't even seen it, by the way, but just knowing enough about how these things work, there's going to be all kinds of, rules and roadmaps and what people can say and what they can't say and when and all that jazz. So I'm sorry, JT.
No, that's okay. It's okay. I'm always trying to squeeze a little bit of info out of something because
Yeah.
I have a feeling it's going to be bigger than people understand, and maybe not even necessarily this go round, but like I said, it's a multi-year partnership, and the next next time FIFA meets is in 2026, and that's going to be in the United States and could be even bigger in a sense for Algorand than this current one. So, always just trying to get a little bit more information, but I guess next time I talk to somebody at Inc., I'll try to squeeze it out of them. Although FIFA's right around the corner, I might just be finding out in real time like everybody else.
Yeah.
So Algorand recently went through a major protocol upgrade to a less than 4-second finality, 6,000 transactions per second, introduction of cross-chain messaging standards like state proofs, with more upgrades down the pipeline like box storage and things of the sort. And I want to ask, because all of these are huge, and I don't think they actually really even got the media attention that they deserved, but how will all of these upgrades help Algorand reach mass adoption?
I think that they provide the space to be able to do it. So the transactions per second, I mean, it's funny because we've got this other chain and it does 200,000 transactions per second or something. And I think it's a bit like people pushing their chest out and so on. I mean, if you look at Algorand today, I think on Explorer, it's like 13, 15 transactions a second going through it, which is a lot. Like I looked at that, I was mesmerized. Even when I discovered Algorand early on, I just sort of sit there and watch Explorer, and you just watch things ticking through all, which I think is amazing. All these computers kind of forming consensus and so on. So I think the main thing there is, okay, we go to 6,000 transactions per second. We're nowhere near needing that kind of capacity right now, but it's there, right? So when we have the adoption, we have the use cases, it's already there, it's already built. And as I understand it, there's a roadmap where even it can go much higher than that as and when needed, right? So I think that's huge. I think the state proofs is another thing. I mean, just look at all the hacks that have happened with bridges. We need to have a multi-chain future where people can move around within those different ecosystems without constantly being worried that they're going to step on a landmine somewhere and get blown up, right? So these things are all game changing.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about some of the hacks and some of the craziness that's going on in the ecosystem. But before we transition off of Algorand a little bit, I want to ask just a little high level question for you, which is, what is the most exciting thing that you've worked on or are working on for Algorand since you joined the team? Another loaded question.
Yeah, no, there's a bunch of stuff. There's a bunch of stuff. Really developing thinking about how we think about sustainability and governance, and these two things are very much interrelated, right? Yeah. So I think that's still a work in progress. There's obviously getting the xGOVs and the sort of community engaged in a almost like a mechanical way, as opposed to people reading Reddit and then reading Twitter and then reading something, like getting that into some kind of coalescing that into something a bit more formal. And also we've got these kind of round tables now with different areas with Web3 and gaming and DeFi and so on. And I think kind of organizing ourselves a bit better in that way, I think, is really important. Yeah, so I'd say that's probably the most important thing, which I know that's a bit nebulous, but I'm not sure when we think about strategy, like actually having a picture of what things look like going forward and emissions and token price and what we spend and how we organize people, like, all that kind of stuff has probably been, I would say, the most foundational things that I've looked at.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the goal to some degree is longevity, and speaking of that, let's move a little bit onto crypto as a whole, because it does seem like everything's kind of in turmoil right now. We had the FTX fiasco. We have whatever contagion is coming out because of that fiasco. What is your opinion on the current state of the markets and everything that's gone on? And then we'll go from there. I'll actually leave it at that.
Don't hate me, but it had to come. It was completely inevitable. I mean, in any situation, if you have an environment where people can, because it's almost like Well, let's take the FTX thing, right? You have a situation where somebody can effectively raise capital in the form of deposits, right? I mean, for all we know, somebody deposits some bitcoins onto FTX and it gets sold 2 seconds later and gets used to pay for a stadium in Miami. Like, it's not even, it's kind of even beyond the point of, in traditional banking, you've got Reg W and things like this, where they're super strict. If you've got like a bank has an asset management business, for example, well, the bank is like, there's very specific prohibitions about not being able to lend that asset management business depositors money or even do repos or even it's like it would be much if you were sitting inside of, I don't know, Credit Suisse, right, the bank, it would be much easier for you to do a deal with PIMCO as a bank than it would be for you to do a deal with Credit Suisse Asset Management. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
The asset management part's like the hedge fund proprietary thing, and the bank is not even. If you're a custodian or an exchange or something, your assets should be much safer there than they are in a bank, because a bank by design is about taking short-term deposits and turning them into kind of long-term investments,
right?
i.e., mortgages. So I think the whole thing is just like it's kind of it's pretty ridiculous, but it's also inevitable if you have an environment where people can set things like that up and there's no check on them. And so, to my mind, there's like you can kind of solve that in one of two ways. You can solve it the way it's always been solved, which is with a bunch of laws and regulations and enforcement, or you can solve it technologically, which gets us on to proof of reserves and all these kind of things that people are talking about now, which frankly, it's a bit disappointing that crypto, which is meant to solve the world's problems, has not solved its own problem in this regard of how do people's money, how do people's assets, how are they best safeguarded?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is too is like you said, there's a big push for the proof of reserves for these exchanges, which one I think should have been there all along. It should have just been the standard of the ecosystem. But I'm a little actually concerned that exchanges will start to post these proof of reserves and they won't actually mean too much because we won't have any idea on how much their liabilities are. Do they have more assets or do they have more liabilities than assets? When are those liabilities due? If there was a bank run, even with this proof of reserves, like would they still go under? Because we have no idea what the other financials are. So I do hope that becomes more transparent in time. And I want to get your opinion because it does seem like the regulators are going to come heavy into the space because of this FTX disaster. What types of regulations do you think the space needs, and how do you think the regulators are going to handle it after the fallout we just had?
I don't. I mean, maybe I'll go back to the first part of what you were saying.
Yeah.
150%, like proof of reserves on its own means nothing, zero. It doesn't mean anything. If I tell you, like, JT, give me some of your money. Oh, and by the way, I'm taking money from a bunch of other people.
Right.
And then I show you proof that I have $1 billion. What comfort does that give you that your money is safe?
Not
All
much.
it tells you is that I have $1 billion. Maybe I've taken $5 billion of money from people. You've got no clue. The thing that actually you want to uncover or that you want proof of in any kind of financial context is not proof of reserves, it's proof of solvency. That you have the resources and the means to be able to pay off your liabilities as they fall due. So proof of reserves, yeah, it doesn't mean anything. So I think the thing is it only means something if you're able to also prove your liabilities in real time and match it with the reserves in real time so that you also avoid this problem of like where people are suspecting, oh, look, they just did their proof of reserves and 2 seconds later there's 100 million went out the door. I think that kind of stuff would be avoided. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is that there isn't a reason in principle why exchanges need to be custodying people's assets. So if you think about the purpose of an exchange, I mean, in the very old days, it used to be a tree, and a bunch of people who had assets to buy and sell would gather under the tree, and they'd make deals with each other, and everybody knew that that was the tree you go to if you want to buy or sell something. In the same way, there's no reason why you couldn't have all of the assets that are trading on, the only reason why the assets are kind of there in the first place is because they're also fulfilling the trade settlement function. So if I buy something from you, I want to know you have it in the first place to be able to sell it to me. But there's no reason why those roles can't be separated, right? Because for every buyer on an exchange, there has to be a seller. which means there's just one asset that we're talking about. That one asset could be custodied by a different party. That's another way to mechanically solve it, and that could be the party doing the proof of reserves.
Yeah, some sort of separation there would be great. And I mean, in my opinion, I think decentralized exchanges have already solved this issue. But I suppose the broader issue becomes that a lot of or at least to reach mass adoption, there's not going to be, everyone's not going to want to self custody their own tokens. So I think that's where these exchanges have a little bit of a leg up because they know not everyone wants to take that responsibility to be in charge of their 12 or 24 word passphrase and keep it somewhere safe in case their house burns down or whatever it might be. It's a lot of work and a lot of responsibility to keep those things safe. And until there's more work in the ecosystem being done to help people self custody in a way that's easy and not anxiety inducing, I do think that centralized exchanges like FTX or any of the sort will have a position in the market because they're promising, even though we've seen that that's not really the case, but they're at least promising the idea of security. And if you don't have to worry about losing your keys, you don't have to worry about losing your crypto, of course, unless something blows up like we did just now. So it's really exciting to see how the space evolves and tackles that problem, because I do think that's the next big problem in the pathway to adoption.
Yeah. And on the second part of your question, right, is that I definitely saw this after the financial crisis as well. But the more, rightly or wrongly, the more egregious that behavior is perceived to be within an industry, the higher the risk of sloppy and ill thought out and extreme legislation. And I think part of the problem here is that, like, crypto is just a very global thing, and with the exception of the US and some areas, there's not many regulators around the world that feel like it's easy for them to lay their hands on somebody in Seychelles or St. Kitts and Nevis or Bermuda, or it's not straightforward for them to do that. And the traditional means of saying, well, you're not allowed to offer services to people in my country, well it's kind of hard if, like, those services are being offered over the internet.
Right.
It's not like you can just go kick in the front door and arrest everybody. So I think that's challenging, and I think the stakes just went up for really extreme forms of regulation where they just kind of. And I do think, like we talked about with the proof of reserves, proof of liabilities, proof of solvency stuff, there's a lot of genuinely innovative things here, where the whole point of this stuff should be that you shouldn't need like 15 parties to be involved to do a single transaction.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, a crypto was born out of the ethos of peer-to-peer, and it seems like somewhere along the way we've begun to lose that ethos a little bit. So hopefully, with some of these fiascos, we kind of regain that understanding of sort of why it all began in the first place. So, but I have to ask, where does crypto go from here? Because it seems like we're at a pretty low point. I mean, I'm not just talking about price, talking about morale. I'm talking about people's interest in the space in general. It just seems like there's a very low point in the crypto industry. So I want to ask on your opinion on where it goes from here.
I think it's going to go. I mean, I said the other day, it's back to basics, and somebody's like, "Well, what's basics?" But I think it's, to be honest, it's very just grassroots practical use cases. And I'll grab one that I talked about before, but the provision of disaster relief funds in the US. I mean, there's no possibility for somebody to like ape into a US disaster and the thing moons and they like that thing is gone, right? It's just not there, but it's actually just a really useful practical solution. And I think that's where it goes, right? So will we see as many pink Lamborghinis in the future? I doubt it. I think that there's only so many times you can repeat the same cycle, right? And by the same cycle, this is maybe this is sort of a wrong. I don't think something will last forever if its entire foundation is speculative, if I put it that way, right? There has to be uses, and I know there's uses, right? But I think what's happened in the past few years is that the speculation and that part of it has kind of grown out of all proportion to the to the genuinely useful use cases. And so I think one of those things I think is definitely going away, at least for now. And there's a lot of talented developers, people who've been doing all sorts of things, and some of those things have been useful, and some of those things have been useless. And so I think it's really an opportunity for the industry to refocus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think it's very fair to say that these bull markets, so to speak, have certainly been driven by speculation. And I do think and hope that the next I don't even want to say bull market, but for lack of a better phrase, for the next bull market will be driven by utility, because it's I think we've reached the peak of the speculative bubble. I don't know how much more. I think you're absolutely right. I don't know how many more cycles of just pure speculation could go on before either it just collapses or it has to transition to utility. So I'm hopeful. I'm excited. I know there's a lot of great projects building, not only in Algorand, but just across the blockchain ecosystem at large, that are focused on real world, useful endeavors that I do think will change not only the ecosystem, but potentially even the world at large. But I only have you here for a couple more minutes, so I want to ask a couple lighthearted questions before we wrap up. I have way too many questions, to be honest, but I know we won't get to them all, so I'll have to invite you back on the show sometime. But really lighthearted, who do you think is going to win the World Cup?
Pass.
Pass. Awesome. All right, we'll pass. We'll go on to the next one. Let's see. So
I sort of have to say Italy, but we'll see. You know, my wife is Italian, so if I don't say that, I'm going to have a problem.
There you go. You went from passing to saying Italy. I'll take it. I'll take it. All right, awesome. So let's talk about art just real quick. So this one is completely off topic when it comes to blockchain, but I was doing a little research on you, and I thought this was really interesting. I love physical art. I love art spaces. So I wanted to ask, about 6 years ago, you co-founded a project called Rochester Square, which is a long-term project to transform a derelict garden nursery in the heart of London into a community art space. So I want to ask, what inspired you to lead that effort?
It was really two things. One is, I guess, it being a derelict space, there was this half-acre abandoned nursery with a bunch of squatters living in it that was close to where I lived. So I used to walk past it every day all the way to work. I went in, I met the squatters, I saw what they were doing, but it was curious to me that you can have a city that's as real estate's at a premium, people are looking for space, it's really, and then you just have this big kind of open area in the middle of the city. So it's a long story. I mean, it would be a whole show on its own, but we ended up my wife and I effectively purchased the lands in 2016, and then we developed it into a creative center. So there's 30 or so artists there. There's schools come by. There's ceramics facilities with kilns. There's all kinds of events, and it's a wonderful thing. It's a space for the whole community to come in and use. So it's been a wonderful project.
That's awesome. I think that's a beautiful note to end this interview on. Eric, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to come on the show. I know you have a meeting after this, but hopefully we can meet up in real life at Decipher later on, I think maybe 3 or 4 weeks from now, actually.
You bet. No, I'm super looking forward to that. And I think in the next day or so, you saw we're going to have a panel all about kind of frauds and blow-ups and this type of thing. And
Is that replacing the SBF panel that was supposed to happen? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm going to do a panel then, and I think there's going to be, we're going to have a super guest for that that's going to be announced in the next day or two, knock on wood. I'm just doing the final negotiations now. So.
Well, maybe by the time the video comes out, that information will be out as well. Eric, this has been fantastic. I don't want to make you late to your interview, but as I said, hopefully I'll catch up with you in Dubai and talk to you again soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks a lot, JT.
Of course, not a problem. And for those tuning in and have watched to the end of this video, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes, and we'll catch you in the next one. Thanks.
Thanks a lot.